Mark Rogers TV going live on a Saturday night. You have reached the voice of college football. So what that means is between myself, you, the viewer, the fan, the one that comments and makes your suggestions and opinions known, and then the many media guests that we bring into the show, that would be 98 just in 2017. We are the voice of college football. We bring in more voices than anyone, and respected voices like Peter Burns of the SEC Network and ESPN had him on last night, and those videos will be released shortly. We did release the video with Peter Burns and myself discussing spring football in the SEC at Mississippi State and at Texas A&M, with Jimbo Fisher taking over in College Station, and of course Joe Moorhead in Starkville. And a number of videos just in the last week. I think this might have been one of the better weeks that we've ever had in regards to top flight guests, talking Ohio State, Miami, USC, Penn State, Texas, Nebraska, South Carolina, Bama, Washington State, Mizzou, and LSU, and a ton coming from the SEC all around. Either subscribe to my YouTube channel, which would be great. I would appreciate that. If you love college football, if you don't, certainly don't subscribe to my YouTube channel. Subscribe if you love college football. And if you just want to hear the audio, go to Podbean, iTunes, or Stitcher and just search Mark Rogers TV. So you can probably tell if you're a regular that I love doing these live streams because I can just cut loose, just rant and ramble, and then bring you in and get some feedback from you, and you can take the topics, you can take the live stream in whatever direction that you want. I do have a couple suggestions and one particular topic that hit me today in just the last few minutes, so I fired up the live stream to hear from you guys. So I will do that right now. So welcome to the live stream on Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. Hope you guys find me. And as I have mentioned a number of times, I would like to be able to send you guys notifications, so we'll get that worked out, because I know that you guys are taken off guard. You have a life and other things to do, and would like to know, hey, he's going live at 8 o'clock on Saturday night or Monday at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, or whatever the situation is. NCIS fanatic, I'm playing against the Jets on Madden right now, and I'm 45-3. I would think just about anybody would be up on the Jets right now, 45-3. Is that the current 2017 Jets? Frank, hope you're doing well. And the topic that hit me just a few minutes ago, I saw online yesterday that the Tennessee Vols and Jeremy Pruitt have hired Chris Weinke, former Heisman Trophy winner, as their running backs coach. Now, Chris Weinke was Bama's offensive analyst, not technically on the coaching staff, similar to what we've seen with a number of assistants with his 10th coaching position opening up. A lot of the analyst roles has been moved into the coaching number. But for Chris Weinke, he was on the Bama staff last year and winning the national championship again as offensive analyst. Before that, Chris Weinke was in the NFL with the Rams just prior to Jared Goff taking off last season. So I don't know what that says about Chris Weinke's coaching ability, but he was the Rams quarterback coach in 2015 and 16. And of course, he was a longtime NFL quarterback, as NFL careers go, 7 seasons, mostly with the Carolina Panthers. So the thought came to mind, I don't know that Chris Weinke is one of the more respected Heisman Trophy winners. And sometimes I think that's because guys don't have stellar NFL careers, and that tarnishes their college production and the awards that they earned. And suddenly there's a thought and there's a narrative there that this guy didn't deserve his Heisman Trophy or didn't deserve to be considered this great college player because he was not a really good NFL player. And I certainly separate the two depending on the argument. If you're talking about all-time great at both levels, then of course the argument comes into play. Take Tim Tebow, who is one of the great college quarterbacks of all time, moved on to the NFL and things did not work out. although he was really not given a second chance after his stint in Denver, which was quite successful in terms of wins and losses and going to the playoffs and winning that big playoff game against the Steelers and then getting trounced by the Patriots. But still, Tim Tebow, I believe, has retired from the NFL with a quarterbacking record of 8-5. So most quarterbacks that are 8-5 win 8 of 13 starts in the NFL are given a next chance. That really is not my subject. I was just going off on a bit of a rant. Largest Heisman snub, Larry Fitzgerald. So this is what I'm getting to. So we've gone back to, I believe, 2003 or 4 with Larry Fitzgerald. What season would that be? That would have been 2003 with Jason White. All right, so that's exactly, Frank, you have pinned it. This is my topic for the night. I am not targeting Chris Winkie whatsoever. I have not gone back to compare his stats against the runner-up or anybody else in the Heisman race in 2000, but I believe Chris Winkie solidified his status and certainly led arguably the best program in college football at the time. They won the national championship in 1999 when Ron Dayne won the Heisman at Wisconsin, which was a bit of a career award for Ron Dayne. Not that he didn't have an outstanding 1999 season. But then in 2000, Chris Winkie won the Heisman Trophy after winning the national championship. And Florida State was a big favorite in the national championship game the following season as the defending champ and was trounced by Oklahoma. Well, of course, the Heisman Trophy had already been awarded, and Chris Winkie and the Seminoles were the number one team in the country, and he had statistically an outstanding season. They were 12-0 and the favorite to beat Oklahoma and basically were shut out. Their defense scored the safety. They lost 13-2. So Larry Fitzgerald, Jason White, if somebody could pull up Jason White's stats from 2003 while I go down some of the other possible snubs or undeserving. So you could take it from one side or the other. We could go down the guys that did not deserve to win the Heisman. Then, of course, who deserved to win it, who should have won it, therefore, who was snubbed. So the undeserving side or the snub side. Again, don't. And I know Larry Fitzgerald was an exceptional performer at Pitt. They were not extremely good. They were okay. He had outstanding numbers, won the Biletnikoff Award, was an All-American. I don't know, as a wide receiver, that he should have won the Heisman for sure. I don't want his greatness in the NFL to change perception or change the narrative or be a point of revisionist history. We shouldn't do that. Let's simply look at that season, Larry Fitzgerald versus Jason White and anybody else involved in that race. I found it interesting, and I came across this and really just clarified and came up with the exact number off what I had already known in talking to Claire Crawford the other night about Ohio State football. And our discussion was what we talked about on here last night concerning your team, your program, best win, the one that you cherish the most, and then the worst loss, the most crushing, excruciating loss, and then, of course, your favorite coach, your favorite player. So she mentioned Archie Griffin, and I knew that his status in college football is, of course, legendary and should be. He's the only two-time winner of the Heisman Trophy, 1974-75. But I knew that 1975 season, for as good as it was for the Buckeyes in going to the Rose Bowl as the number one team in the country, so he won the Heisman as the star player for the undefeated team that was number one in the country. They did lose the Rose Bowl and the national championship. UCLA beat them 23-10. Yeah, I will get to Deshaun Watson. So, Frank, you're right there with me. But concerning Archie Griffin that year, I asked Claire, I said, the second Heisman Trophy that Archie Griffin won, guess how many touchdowns he scored that season? So anybody watching right now, guess how many touchdowns Archie Griffin scored his second Heisman Trophy winning season in 1975. Just take a guess. And of course, since I'm asking this question, you'll probably guess lower than you would have guessed. So try to guess what you would have guessed had it just been something that somebody would have asked, not trying to set you up. A Heisman Trophy running back in the 1970s, when just about everybody just did nothing but run the ball 90% of the time. Your star running back for the number one team in the country. How many touchdowns did Archie Griffin score that year? So we got George getting ready for the Florida Auburn basketball game. The Gators need this bad, 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 bad. Okay, you're going with 9 touchdowns. All right, I've given you a few seconds to think this one over. Not that there's a whole lot of thought process unless you know. So, in a what turned out to be 12-game season, I don't know if they updated the stats with the bowl stats, but he could have only scored 1 touchdown in the Rose Bowl. They scored 10 points against UCLA. Archie Griffin scored 4 touchdowns in 1975. He did run for 1,450 yards. So basically, what happened most of the time is Ohio State would march down the field running the ball, with Archie Griffin gaining most of the yardage, although Pete Johnson's gained over 1,000 yards on nearly as many carries. Archie Griffin only carried the ball 37 more times than Pete Johnson. He had 1,400 plus yards. Pete Johnson had over 1,000, I think 1,059. Pete Johnson scored, get this, 25 rushing touchdowns. Archie Griffin scored 4 on the same team. Griffin won the Heisman. That's difficult to imagine, a Heisman Trophy winning running back scoring 4 touchdowns. Hey, Mark, did you see Ohio State's game-winning shot against Indiana last night? I used to love Ohio State basketball, not nearly as much as Ohio State football, but from the time I started watching sports, 1978, 79, in that range, I have watched and loved Ohio State basketball and not been a fanatic quite to that degree, but really liked the team and watched them, rooted for them hard. Jimmy Jackson years, Scooney Penn, Michael Redd, you can take it through every era before that, Herb Williams and Clark Kellogg. About 5-6 years ago, I think much of it had to do with doing this and focusing on college football all the time. Just took me out of the college basketball world. I was working on some stuff a few minutes ago, and I just flipped on ESPN, and Kansas was playing Texas Tech. And that was really, before last night, the first college basketball I have seen the entire season. I am not kidding. First 1 minute of college basketball that I've watched. I don't know any players, don't know anything about it. That said, I'm sitting here with my boy last night, and he loves the NBA. So he's always going to watch the NBA over a college basketball game. He's watching the NBA. During the break, he flips around, and I was actually surprised that there was a college basketball, a major college basketball game on a Friday night. That's how out of touch I am that there was college basketball on a Friday night, because nobody plays on a Friday night, or nobody did play on a Friday night. So we came across FS1 and the Ohio State Indiana game. So I actually did watch the second half of the game and saw the incredible shot, 3-point, a deep 3 to win it. That'll get me set for March Madness, the Big Ten tournament, all the other conference tournaments, and watching March Madness. Again, the last 5 or 6 years, I've watched it. I've kept track of it. It's been on, but I didn't mind if I missed something, whereas before, I just had to see as much as possible. I have actually forgotten that it was noon on Thursday of the NCAA tournament's first round to tune in. That's what it's been like for me for the last 5 or 6 years. So I know I'm speaking to a void in the audience when I'm pumping out these college football videos during March Madness. For a lot of people, they're like, okay, I'm shifting. I love college football, but I'm shifting to basketball. I'll see you in a month or so. And obviously, a lot of people, I'll see you in late August. All right. I misunderstood the question. Cade McNown, UCLA, I think. Yeah, he was really good in 1998. I can't think of who else would have been in the race. Ron Dane would have been one. They actually met up in the Rose Bowl that year, and Dane and McNown had a bit of a duel. Air and ground, Wisconsin, UCLA, and the Badgers won the Rose Bowl. 1998, of course, Tennessee won the national championship over Florida State. All right, these are some other ones I came up with. This is not necessarily an undeserving, but it was an unexpected outcome for me, at least. I was in the South at the time covering the SEC in 1998. No, this would have been 1990. This would have been 1997. Of course, T. Martin was the guy in 1998 when Tennessee won the national championship. But everybody expected Peyton Manning to win the Heisman in 1997. And boom, Charles Woodson won it. I had no issue with that. He made the biggest plays on the biggest stage that turned the season for Michigan. Michigan would not have won 2 or 3 of those games without Charles Woodson making just remarkable plays. And in the biggest game of the year, what did Charles Woodson do against Ohio State? He returned a punt for a touchdown, a la Desmond Howard at the Big House. He picked off a pass in the end zone to stop a drive. He also had a big play over the middle as a receiver. He caught it. He ran it down to the 5 or 10 yard line. So he had the 3 big plays in the game: punt, return, touchdown, interception to thwart a drive in the end zone, and a big reception on a 3rd and long to convert what then turned out to be another touchdown in a game that Michigan led 20-0, held on to beat Ohio State and David Boston 20-14, as was the infamous David Boston spouting off all week, saying that they were 2 or 3 touchdowns better than Michigan. Woodson, of course, was the better man on the field, although David Boston did catch a long touchdown in that game. All right, UCLA is a sleeping giant. Yeah, if we're looking at right now, they possibly could be. Chip Kelly has been exceptional, obviously, at his stop at Oregon. And it's a different situation at UCLA. Probably a good thing that he did not land at Florida, both for the program and both for him. I just think he's a better fit to stay in the Pac-12 and coach there. So Uptown Yankee has pulled Larry Fitzgerald's stats from 2003. 92 catches, 1,672 yards, 18 plus per catch, and 22 touchdowns. So again, there is no comparison between Larry Fitzgerald and Jason White as a football player. Now that we have 15 years to look back on this, there is no comparison in terms of their athletic prowess or their productivity or status as a football player. But Larry Fitzgerald's, of course, was built on a great NFL career that will land him undoubtedly, maybe first ballot as a Hall of Famer, versus Jason White, who benefited from playing in a great offensive system and playing bad defenses, most notably playing in a great offensive system and playing for Oklahoma, being in the national spotlight. And in that 2003 season, they were the number 1 team. They lost to LSU, were pretty much manhandled in that game against Oklahoma or against LSU at the Sugar Bowl to lose the national championship. The LSU front 7, it was one of those classic SEC clinics on defense with the defensive ends that are just too fast for any team's offensive tackles, and LSU just was all over Jason White, and he was a statue and couldn't get away, and they lost that game. It's all fun and games until you play an SEC team and 400-pound linemen, and then the UCLA run will stop again, just like Oregon stopped. Yeah, that was an interesting set of circumstances there for several years with Oregon. Everybody was scared of Oregon. I would routinely get into discussions with people about Oregon, and they were really, really good from 2007 or 8 until a couple years ago after Marcus Mariota left. Of course, they crumbled. But think about them playing Auburn in the national championship game. Okay, close game. They weren't outclassed. They took it to the last second and lost on a field goal, 22-19. But other than that, anytime that they came up against a really elite team in another conference, i.e. Ohio State in the championship game in 2014, in the Rose Bowl in 2010, that LSU opener that you're talking about right there, That game played in Dallas, I believe. LSU was clearly the better team. Just Oregon, I know that the times that they were matched up against Ohio State, I would hear for 6 weeks how Oregon was going to run them off the field because they were just so quick and so fast. And how in the world would Ohio State handle them in space? And my typical thought process was, if we take these two rosters in 5 years and compare the NFL players, and this isn't the only thing you look at, but this certainly is a good starting point. Look at the rosters of the two teams. Who's going to produce more NFL players? It's not even close. Of course, Ohio State has. And the LSU game that you mentioned right there against Oregon, Auburn beat them, but it was a close game. But LSU, that was a clinic. The Rose Bowl was not a blowout for the Buckeyes, but they were clearly the better team. It was an Oregon offense that was scoring close to 50 points per game. They only scored 17. They were held to under 300 yards total offense. And then, of course, the championship game, despite turning it over 4 times and not getting any turnovers, Ohio State just still handled them well. Sean Green had better numbers in 2008 than Mark Ingram had in 2009, yet Ingram won the Heisman and Green wasn't even a candidate. So, of course, Sean Green, the Iowa running back, who then went on to play for the New York Jets and played in a couple AFC championship games for the Jets with Mark Sanchez at quarterback. I'm not understanding, though, Ricky, because you're comparing Sean Green's 2008 season to Mark Ingram's 2009 season. So we need to find somebody in 2009. I would think that guy would be Colt McCoy, who had a tremendous 2009 season. He's the first guy off the top of my head in 2009 that possibly could have been a Heisman winner that season over Mark Ingram. Sean Green won in 2008, the year Sam Bradford won, as Oklahoma was undefeated before they lost the national championship game, of course. All right, the SEC is known for their front seven, and that's typically been the difference between the conferences. So right now, I don't know who has the best conference. If somebody held a gun to my head, I would go Big Ten, although I think the SEC talent is slightly better. I thought that the ACC played the best in 2016. I thought those bowl games were meaningful in showing that the ACC had arrived. Clemson, of course, winning the most important games, Ohio State and the Alabama championship game, but also the Florida State and the win over Michigan and some other games in which the ACC looked really good 2 years ago. But Big Ten, ACC, SEC, I can go either way. I understand the argument for anybody. I think it's closer now than it's been in forever. But when the SEC was dominant, the difference is exactly what Frank is talking about. The speed off the edge, outside linebackers, defensive ends. That's the big difference between the SEC. That was the issue that Jim Tressel and Troy Smith had in 2006 in getting blasted by Florida. They could not block, even with NFL offensive linemen, could not block the front seven of the Florida Gators. Yeah, they're monsters. Sean Green, 2008. That is an interesting one, Ricky, though, because I doubt if many people are going to bring up Sean Green. All right, if we go back to the comment by NCIS Fanatic 21, Jason White had 40 touchdowns and 10 picks in 2003. Same TD interception ratio as Jameis Winston in 2013. So again, I know that Larry Fitzgerald has his supporters in revisionist history concerning the Heisman in 2003. And one of them is one of our contributors from Cardiac Hill at SB Nation for Pitt football, and that's Jim Hammett. And when I asked him and other contributors to list the thing that they would change in college football history concerning their team, that's what he went to. The 2003 Heisman voting, saying Larry Fitzgerald got snubbed. He got gypped. And I understand that's an outstanding season, but going against the quarterback of the number one team in the nation that threw 40 touchdown passes, I think our view on that situation and that vote total has been skewed by what's happened over the last 15 years and the two paths of the two athletes. Jason White, not an NFL quarterback, two blown out knees, versus Larry Fitzgerald's status as one of the greatest receivers in the history of the NFL. All right. Jason White won the Heisman, having only 8 interceptions in the national championship game. He had 2 interceptions, so that's a good note right there. Because, of course, the other thing that mars some of these Heisman seasons is that we look back and say, that guy was awful in his bowl game or national championship game, and we can't consider that. It's like when people say so-and-so should not have made the playoff, or so-and-so should have made the playoff because look at what happened during the playoff. And I understand the argument that the playoff maybe justifies the selection, i.e. Ohio State 2014. They went out there and did it against likely the two best teams in the country, Oregon and Alabama, the two best other than themselves. So it justified the selection. But I don't think that TCU and Baylor are any less of a selection because you've got to compare the results or look at the results or compare the teams or the players at the time that the selection was made. Looks like you have someone spamming your page. Yeah, I have to have a way to kick those guys off, and I don't know. So I appreciate you looking that up. I just made a few clicks and reported those people. So hopefully they go find something better to do. All right, Ricky. Yeah. Who else did I have here? I cut a video in this one because it was very recent. Derrick Henry, 2015, had a great season, ran for 2,000 yards, basically put that offense on his back late in the season. At least against Florida, against Auburn, those teams. Jay Coker had a great championship game, a very efficient championship game against Clemson, and won the national title, scoring a ton of points, 45. Although they had the Kenyon Drake return for the kickoff for 7 there, but still a very productive game out of Jay Coker. But before that, Derrick Henry down the stretch carried the tide. His rushing totals against the likes of Texas A&M, LSU in November, Mississippi State, Auburn, then Florida in the SEC championship game were outstanding. But Christian McCaffrey was just out of his mind a better player. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I really ran the metrics in terms of who was more valuable in my estimation. And Christian McCaffrey did not score the number of touchdowns that Derrick Henry did, but basically he changed the game plan for the opponent. He caught 40-some passes. He ran the ball nearly as many times as Derrick Henry and had nearly as many rushing yards, and then blew him away with all-purpose yards with punt and kickoff returns and with receiving yards. And then on top of that, after he was so successful as a return guy early in the season, teams had to adjust their special teams approach to Christian McCaffrey's great play as a special teams ace. And that gave Stanford incredible field position. So he basically changed the game plan for the opponent. And the numbers really speak to it. Do you think Ezekiel Elliott or Christian McCaffrey was better in college? Zeke was a horse. He was a man. He was a beast. McCaffrey, a different type of back, caught those passes out of the backfield, was a return guy. So I go with McCaffrey as the player. I'll go with Zeke Elliott as the guy out of the backfield as a running back. And Zeke Elliott is a superior blocking back, not for another running back, but in pass protection. Really, really good. Thank you, George. I appreciate it. I did the same thing. I don't know how long that kind of thing takes. I would have to go through here and sift and try to figure out how to kick him off right now. I don't really understand that type of person that has nothing better to do. I have so many things to do in life rather than annoy other people. The only people that I annoy are the people that choose to watch my show and disagree with me. But in terms of just going out and annoying people, that's fine. McCaffrey killed us. Respect. Yeah. So, Ricky, being an Iowa fan, you saw it up close. And yeah, he had wide open spaces to work with, but he was just a mismatch out of the backfield and you couldn't handle him. And that was an ugly Rose Bowl. And now he's doing it in the NFL. And again, I cut a video on that because I went on a rampage, as I do occasionally, about something in particular. And that was one that I could see coming. So I tried to get ahead of it. Not that I was going to sway any voters, but I talked up McCaffrey leading into the Heisman vote. Of course, he lost. And then I went on another rant for a week about how he should have won the Heisman. The other one, I went on a similar rampage for Deshaun Watson in 2016, the next season. Okay, Lamar Jackson, if you really dissect his 2016, he came out of the gate and he dominated some marginal teams and put up video game kind of numbers. And just similar to what, who was it, was doing to the Jets. Of course, NCIS Fanatic 21 was doing to the Jets, the 2017 Jets, just making a mockery of other teams, putting up video game kind of numbers. And that's what Lamar Jackson did in early 2016. There were some other candidates that didn't show up that season. Some other guys that we anticipated to be in the race, and they underperformed. Then Lamar Jackson takes off with these just video game numbers, and he was exceptional. Don't get me wrong. His numbers, he was rolling up 450 to 500 yards of total offense and a ton of touchdowns, like 45 total touchdowns. But they were a non-factor in the race. They were for much of the season. They had the one close loss to Clemson, so he played well in that game. They could have won that game. I don't know. I don't remember who the receiver was. It was a third down play. Clemson winning by less than a touchdown. Lamar Jackson bringing the Cardinals down the field through a fourth down play. They needed to convert or the game was over. And the receiver just had a lame effort. It was either Staples, Jamari Staples, or one of those Louisville wide receivers just did not extend the ball, just stepped out of bounds. The game was over. They missed it by a half yard and the game was over. So Lamar Jackson did play well against a great Clemson defense on the road. So I credit him there. But then they just wilted down the stretch, and he had a bad game against Kentucky. They lost to Houston, which was, if you watch the game, not largely his fault, but he was just under siege by that Houston-led defense by Ed Oliver and company, and just couldn't keep up. The homeless Mexican, go kick rocks. Absolutely. So I just thought, despite throwing 15 interceptions, that Deshaun Watson put his team in position. And again, it's easy to think, okay, he was so great in the national championship game and in the playoff overall, he should have won the Heisman. Well, we didn't have that to know at the time, but I thought he had built enough as the best quarterback in the nation, the most complete quarterback playing for what was arguably at the time the best team. And he finished it off with a great ACC championship game against a game North Carolina team. And Clemson needed Deshaun Watson to be that good in that particular game. And they needed him to be really outstanding. And again, I matched up the seasons and I saw where Deshaun Watson was playing meaningful, productive minutes against the best teams on the schedule. The ACC championship game The Notre Dame game, he was really good. The Louisville game, he was really good. He threw a couple picks in the first half. Then he was just outstanding that he should have won the Heisman Trophy. And then besides that, you guys go back to 1956. This is one of the most amazing Heisman results ever. And I know it was just a different game, different style of game. Therefore, that's reflected in the stats. But Paul Hornung in 1956, and I don't know how much you guys delve into history, so this might be well known. It's kind of overall well known that this happened, but people that focus on current football and just during their lifetime may not go back. But in 1956, Paul Hornung for Notre Dame won the Heisman Trophy for a 2-8 football team, and he threw 3 touchdown passes and 13 interceptions. And he won the Heisman Trophy. I have nothing to respond to beyond that's just unthinkable. And even in that day and age where there were not big passing stats, if you go and look at the top 10 candidates, so go to College Football Reference and look at the leading candidates and vote totals for the Heisman for 1956, and you see Paul Hornung won it for a 2-8 football team, throwing 3 touchdown passes. And then you can pick out a couple other guys, including Jim Brown, who could have won the Heisman Trophy. It's absurd. North Carolina 2015. Oh, I need to backtrack here. North Carolina, Ryan says 2015, Louisville in 16, NC State in 17. Don't know what that's referring to. For how dominant Clemson has appeared to be in the ACC since 2015 to this season, there always seems to be a team that either beat Clemson or should have beaten them. So let's understand there's a little bit of luck involved, and Ryan points it out right here. The season that Clemson won the national championship, of course, they lost to a pretty marginal Pitt team, a pretty good team, but they had Jordan Whitehead and James Conner and some playmakers on both sides of the ball. Juan Price, a really good defensive end, one of the best in the country, but a Pitt team that went 8-5 and lost to Northwestern in the Pinstripe Bowl. They lost that game 43-42 at home. Okay. That was kind of their Ohio State-Iowa game, but they didn't lose by 31 points. They lost by 1 point. But in that season, Ryan makes a great point. Now, had Clemson beaten North Carolina State and blocked the field goal or made a great stop where their defense made the stop, made the play to win, that would be one thing. But North Carolina State just shanked the field goal and missed it. So Clemson benefited from somebody else's ineptitude to go to the national championship game. Of course, they had to win the ACC and win the playoff, and they did everything right. But we could go through college football history, and this would be a great video to cut as well, and point out those moments in which a team, not because of their playmaking ability, not because of anything that they did, but by sheer luck, lucked into an opportunity to win a national championship or get to a national championship. Yeah, North Carolina in 15. That was a game in which I know that there were some controversial calls in the ACC title game against the Tar Heels late in the game that and I'm not going to make judgments on the calls because I don't remember them exactly, but I remember there were some controversial pass interference plays that really helped Clemson out against the Tar Heels. Louisville, yes, in 16 with a number of plays in that game, but specifically, I should watch the cut down version of that game and just go to the end of the game. That Louisville wide receiver, a good wide receiver, a guy that played for 3 or 4 years, started. It was either Staples or it was somebody else who just inexplicably, with a game on the line, with a chance to win the ACC, to win the division and be the heavy favorite in the championship game, just stepped out of bounds. 4th down. Just really didn't fight for the yardage. And then, NC State in 2017. Oh, so Ryan, I believe, is talking about the NC State game in 2017 that was really close against Clemson as well. But also you can look at the 2016 game that went to overtime. Regardless of what the score was, North Carolina State would have won the game had they kicked the field goal, but they missed it because it was a tie game that, yes, went to overtime then, and Clemson won. Earl Campbell really let down Texas against Notre Dame for the national championship in 1977 at the Cotton Bowl. They got smothered like 38-10. What a run of running backs to win the Heisman Trophy in the mid-70s to early 80s. Great all-time backs that carried that success in college through the NFL. Tony Dorsett, Earl Campbell, George Rogers to a lesser extent, but he had some successful seasons in the NFL. Billy Sims, Charles White, again to a lesser extent, but he did win a rushing title with the Rams. Marcus Allen, Earl Campbell. Yeah, if you go from 1976 after Archie Griffin won back-to-back, Tony Dorsett, Earl Campbell, Billy Sims, Charles White, George Rogers, Marcus Allen, Herschel Walker, Mike Rozier, not a great NFL running back, but he was productive for the Oilers when they got to Warren Moon and company and were a good team, an explosive team, a fun team to watch on offense. So those are the ones that I had. I had the Archie Griffin 1975 Heisman Trophy Award with 4 touchdowns, the Woodson Manning controversy in 1998 or 1997, Christian McCaffrey losing to Derrick Henry in 15, Deshaun Watson losing to Lamar Jackson in 16, and then the way back from ancient history, Paul Hornung in 1956 with his 2-8 team and his 3 touchdown passes. So unless there's anything else you guys want to throw out there for tonight, I'm certainly game for another conversation, but I just wanted to go to the mat with some Heisman snubs from the past, and I enjoy doing these live streams. Of course, if there's anybody you know out there who loves college football, tell them we're around. Subscribe to my YouTube channel for the very best in college football coverage. We have a ton of videos headed your way. And if you have any suggestions on what you would like to see, if there's anything that doesn't work for you, anything that we do that, again, could be an improvement, certainly let me know. All right. I appreciate it on a Saturday night, jumping on for some college football with the season months and months away, but we've got spring football coming very, very soon. So good night. Catch you guys later. I appreciate the support, and we'll catch you next time.